How you doing, guys? Today we have an array of Kohlers. So today's project is to take an overview of these three K91s. One might be a K90 Kohler, but that doesn't really matter. Essentially, the owner of these three motors would like to get minimum one good engine out of the three, possibly two. We'll see if we can squeeze out two of them. But right now, the big thing for me is to figure out which one of the three blocks are the best and which one of the three cranks is the best. Now, I am shooting or hoping that this particular crank is the one that is the best. And the reason for that is these two other cranks require a bolt to hold the flywheel on, and I don't particularly like that crankshaft. I prefer having the nut on, especially this is going to go on an RJ or going to go on a wheel horse tractor. So would like to try it. I'm hoping that this crank is the one to go, or the one that'll be the best. You know, unfortunately, this block, the exhaust port is in pretty tough shape. Looks like all the threads are gone. I could tap the port just like a wheel horse tractor would have. So that might be an option. Overall, I haven't taken anything off. I did loosen up the nut on the crank just to make sure that the threads were good, and they are. And then there was a series of pulleys on this crankshaft, which I just got a big ass gear puller and just basically ripped them off. They're junk, or at least they're not going to be used for a wheel horse tractor. Let's put it that way. Outside of that, we're missing the carburetor. This is one of the original carburetor bolts. Obviously, this has been replaced. That looks like a cool factory wire, which is really kind of neat. Governor's in place. The crankshaft end here looks real good, and we'll check the other end when we get there. Obviously, all the tins are in place, and this thing originally had a Fairbanks on it because that's a Fairbanks cup. So that is that. This particular block, again, the exhaust port's in pretty tough shape, so we'll have to see. This one at one time was rebuilt because this thing has an oversized piston. I'll have to take a look. I don't know if that says 20 over or if that's just a butchered one. But definitely looks like the date code on that is September 24th, 1985, right? Something to that effect. This block, it looks pretty good. We'll have to figure out which of the three bearing plates are the one to use. Unfortunately, this does have a chipped fin, but we'll dive into that. This engine doesn't have doesn't have an oil pan, which, that doesn't bode well to the crank, but, it's pretty rough. The thing that's neat, it does get to a certain, well, there it goes. There's a hard spot in it too. So I don't think this crank is going to be anything that we're going to keep. The exhaust port on this one, we'll have to take a look. We'll try to get this off, and hopefully we can save it. We'll pull the head off of this. We'll check the bore. We'll pull the head off of this one, check the bore. This one is over, it's been bored over. The bore is a little bit rusty. Let's take a look. But it's just surface rust, so that will hone out nice and clean. And to be honest with you, this one, the piston is pretty tight in the bore, which is nice. So, high level, first glance, I'm liking this one the best so far. To use, I'll just order a ring kit that's oversized, and then we'll end gap them. This is my high level first view of these engines. So let me do a couple things. Let's go ahead, pull the tins off these two motors. Let's get the heads off these two motors, and let me try to get that exhaust muffler off. And let's take a look at the ports, the bores, and whatever little hidden gems are in there. Okay, so I got a series of the blower cover or the tins off. This motor, once we start seeing stuff like this, we're like, yeah, this is not heading to a good place. We got some dirt and rot in the blower cover, not good. And then this particular motor must have been run in the mud, because look how it's just completely caked. I don't even know what this is. Oh my God, look at that. Look at that. Oh, oops, sorry, my mistake. I mean, this is, oh my God, look at this. This is the bearing plate. I don't know. You know, I mean, let's just take a look. I mean, look at this thing. This thing is just packed with mud. So, I don't know. We'll see. The thread, let's get the flashlight here. Threads don't look too bad there. The threads look like they're intact. The threads look like they're intact, and the threads look like they're intact. So, if we can get this flywheel off, we're going to use this bearing plate at minimum, because this bearing plate, the threads are gone. The threads are gone in this one. But this engine is not any better. Number one, the bearing plate looks good, but the threads are all destroyed. And when we see people stacking washers, okay, on a head, which that one there is just coated in poop. Let's get the extractor out. Oh yeah, it's just all washers. Somebody stacked up washers on the head and then bolted it down for this bracket, which looks like it was, you know, looks like a badger cut it. They clearly used a torch to make this bracket of some sort, and it's super rusty. So I'm not thinking. I'm hoping as long as maybe the block is going to be good. Everything else on this engine, I think, is toast. The flywheel is going to be still good. Grass screen is still good. The head is probably shot on this one. I'm hoping I can get this flywheel off, because this is the crankshaft I want to use. But I'll dig back in. I'm going to get the heads off these two motors, and then I'm going to start taking the flywheels off, and I'll touch back with you, and we'll see where we stand. Okay, so I got them, you know, somewhat preliminarily torn down. Let's take a look at this motor. This is the bearing plate that I'm going to use. The bearing plate on this one is butchered. The bearing plate on that one is butchered. As you can see, a lot of combustion stuff. Standard bore. Okay. Again, this one's been overbored, but I'll have to measure it and see where it is. This one's standard bore, but you can see that there's quite a bit of particulate on this one and that one. I think overall, when it comes to, I did pull the exhaust off this one. The studs didn't break, thank God, but they're probably going to be quite difficult to get out of the threaded portion of the port. The threads on this one, I believe, are good. I'm gonna go ahead and thread those with a tap just to make sure. The exhaust port on this one is in rough shape. Either case, I would probably tap the center port so you could do it just like a real wheel horse should be. So that doesn't necessarily make a big difference. The armature and the coil on this motor appear to be, the armature is original. That's an original Kohler coil. We would have to test it to make sure. We would definitely replace the condenser. So all of that. We're going to take the crank definitely out of this motor and use this crank. This motor, the entire ignition system is MIA. This one has a replacement coil in it of some sort. I'd have to take a look and see what that is. I've never seen one quite with this ribbing on it, but you know, there's always a multitude of manufacturers, repro parters. Armature's in place, coil, the condenser obviously needs to go. So for right now, I think what we're gonna did is I'm going to go ahead and field strip this motor and take a look at exactly what we got, because I want to snake the crank out of this one. I want to take the bearing plate out of this one, the armature and the coil. All that stuff is going to come from that motor. I'm pretty sure the bulk is going to come from that motor. I may use this block. I may use that block. I don't know. I think this engine here, I think is just not worth even. I'm getting a feeling that this particular engine without the oil pan is not even worth even messing with. I think it is what it is. So I'm going to try to use these two engines to make one. I think this one is just, I don't know. Right now, I don't know. I'm going to use that flywheel. That flywheel's in good shape. This flywheel's in good shape too, but it looks like it literally came from Arizona. So I'm not even gonna probably mess with that. The box of parts, because you always got to have a box of parts. That's down there. That's growing, which is gonna get added with a bunch of other things. But I think right now what we're gonna do, or what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna go ahead and field strip that motor down complete, and we'll see where we stand. Okay, so this is the engine that I want to snake the crank and the bearing plate off. And as of right now, I'm still on that pretense. I pulled it out. The crank looks fine. The bearing plate on this engine's fine. Now I'm trying to figure out which block I want to use. On this block, I was hoping, this is a standard bore block. I was hoping to use this one, but what I'm finding is the exhaust ports are killing me. This particular exhaust port, somebody really went to town on this bolt hole. I did rethread it with my with my tap. It worked, but there's a bolt broken off deep inside this block, this bolt hole. You can see somebody's already tried to drill it. It's crooked. So I said, well, you know what? I'll break my big tap out, my 1/14 tap, pipe tap, and tap the port. And as you can see, I'm starting to do that, but the port itself is so eroded that I'm getting to a point in the depth. Where's my flashlight? Here it is. I'm going to start running up to the back side of the port before I get a lot of threads, which is unfortunate because the intake valve guide on this motor is real nice. It's nice and tight. Same with the exhaust valve. So that would provide us a better foundation for a motor. I could just hone it, maybe get 2 new valves, and then use it. But the exhaust port is a disaster, so I don't know if this is the best course of action. So I pulled out, or I'm examining the overboard engine, which the piston's real nice, the bore's nice, the exhaust valve is nice, but the intake valve, the guide is real sloppy. So, and I'll show you that. Let's do this. All right, so and you can see how much slop is in that valve, and you can hear it too. So I don't know if this is such a great thing. I was able to save the bolts, the threads on the bolts, so you could put the exhaust in. But with that valve being so loose, is it worth even using this block? So I'm going to go to the third block and let's take a look and see what the outcome of all that is. So motor number 3. Unfortunately, if we take a look here, you can see a faint halo line about maybe what, a 1/4 of an inch or so below the deck. That is actually quite a ridge. You can really feel it. And, you don't even need your nail. You can really feel it. So this engine block really probably needs to be bored more than honed. I could try honing it. It probably would work pretty good. Let me get my flashlight. Let's take a look here. You can see there's a pretty good visual gap between the piston and the bore. So this one here could be, you could turn this one into an engine that'll run, but you're going to, it's just not going to be the greatest. This one here, the bore's real good. Even though it has some light rust, that'll hone right off. The exhaust valve's in good shape, but the intake really slops around, unfortunately. So before I make a final decision on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I saved the bolts. The bolt threads are fine. There is a little nub of cast iron right here. I'm going to take that off with the die grinder, and I'm going to thread the port. So if you wanted to do like a true wheel horse and put a piece of pipe, threaded pipe in there, we can do that. I'm going to see if I can get that done. If I can get that done, I'm going to recommend that we use this block, even though the the intake valve might be a little sloppy. And then snake, like I said, snake the crank and the bearing plate off of that motor. So let's see what kind of trouble we can get into. I was able to start the threading of this port, so that's going to come out okay. I do have a big 1/2-14 tap here for a piece of pipe thread, so I'm very confident I'll be able to thread that port. The bolts holes are in good shape. The 1/4-20 threads are in good shape. It does have this little dink, missing fin, but who cares? The valve guide is a little bit loose, but who cares in general. The bore, we'll have to reuse this piston, but we'll get a new ring set, and I'll figure out what size that is. We'll get a new rod. We're going to use the crank out of this motor. We're going to use the bearing plate off of this motor. We'll use the armature off this motor. We'll use the coil off this motor. I'll probably snake the entire governor system off of this motor. Looks like we'll try to clean and use that carburetor right there. That's an LMG carburetor. That's for like a Clinton. And then there's it's an early style head here, and you can tell by the number of fins. You can see these are all later style. This is an earlier style head, which is actually pretty cool. It's dirty, but this could be cleaned up, and I'll try to use that head. Obviously, a whole new gasket set. We'll pick and choose the bits and pieces out of this array of stuff that I took off the motors. Oh, well, number one is this dipstick tube thing. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to go to a standard, like an old school style one, which there's one right here, which is in good shape, just needs to be cleaned. So that's going to be my suggestion to the owner of these motors, and we'll see if he agrees that would be the best course of action, and then we'll go from there. It is what it is. There's not, when somebody has had their hand on these motors over the years, you're at the mercy of what they've done. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, a little bit of archaeology of motors. If you could please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. If you would like to, and if you would, just leave me a comment below. And as always, until the next project, you have a great day.